Hello, everyone, and welcome to this fun discussion and chat with our balance designers here for the Company of Heroes 3 team. My name is John. I'm one of the community managers, and we've got some familiar faces, some new faces. Let's go around the room and introduce everyone. Jason, let's start with you. Who are you? How might players know you, and what do you do on the team?
Hey everyone, I'm Jason. I'm a designer leading Balance on Company of Heroes 3. Some of you might know me as Tarnations, but I haven't used that username in a minute here. But yeah,
Back in your competitive 2v2 days.
yes, back. Back in
Uh,
the old days.
and first time on stream with us, Darren, who are you?
Hey,
How might players know you, and what do you do on the team?
hey, you might formerly know me as Mirage Flub. But yeah, I'm Darren. I'm also one of the balance designers on the team for Company of Heroes 3. You
Awesome.
might have known me for doing a bunch of the balance work in Company of Heroes 2 during the community era as well.
Yeah, so great to have you both here. So, folks, we've got a bunch to cover today. We mentioned this beforehand, but we're probably going to keep this nice and short, as today's update is a little bit smaller. But we still got a lot to talk about. And again, if you want to stay up to date with everything on Company of Heroes, you're going to want to follow us on your social platform of choice: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or YouTube at Company of Heroes. You can find our forums, community.companyofheroes.com, and join our Discord at discord.gg/Company of Heroes. And of course, follow us on Twitch so you can find out when we're doing live streams just like this at Relic Entertainment. So today we're going to be doing a brief outline of the balance tuning patch, which is releasing after this broadcast. And then we'll be talking a bit about our future update cadence. Like I said, today's patch features a small number of targeted changes. Jason, I think you described this to me as like tidying up after, or sort of tidying up gameplay balance after Emerald Bear. So, like I said, we'll keep things brief. Then we're going to get into the state of Co3's multiplayer, and we'll talk about some of the balance team's future goals. So, I guess we can just kind of get right down to things. Let's maybe start with a quick overview on the changes coming in today's 1.2.3 update, following up on Emerald Bear, which was 1.2.0. So, Darren, can you maybe talk about some of the items that we're going to be adjusting today?
All right, so yeah, 1.23 is mainly just a cleanup of like 1.2. It's not going to be like a giant meta shift for the game. It's just mainly a bunch of cleanup. So there's a few like underused items that are going to get tuned up, and also like clean up to say some of the bugs like our autocannon. Instead, ended up firing faster, but it also gave us an opportunity to tune like a few of the less impressive autocannon units, let's say the CWT truck, as well as the 250/9 half track.
Hmm.
And there's also a bunch, and yeah, a few more items like the Vespi, which we're moving more in line with the Bishop.
Hmm. What about like some of the air and anti-air stuff? Jason, are we touching anything there with this update?
Yeah. We have a pretty wanted fix in, so your vehicles will stop rotating to shoot their invisible in A. And we're going to be continuing to do AA. So we have some minor changes in this patch, but we're going to save a lot of the other ones for the upcoming and the one after. Because AA is going to be an ongoing process.
Yeah, there's a bigger thing we want to do with anti-air, but we couldn't get it in for this patch. Once we get it in for an upcoming patch, AA should feel much better.
Okay, that's good to hear. So Darren, is there anything else that we're doing in today's patch? Again, I know it's a bunch of bug fixes and some minor tweaks and changes. Is there anything else that you kind of wanted to call out to players?
In terms of like big items, there's nothing really major, as I said once again, but there's a few things like the breakthrough firebombing run will now be faster,
Hmm.
or because it was way too slow because I was using the carpet bombing style run, and there's like a few items that are going to be like far more impressive now. Oh, like the Stoss Troop and STG 44, and there's also fixing of like one of the bugs where we had units revealing themselves in the fog of war that allowed you to drop off maps on them.
That was a pretty fun one I saw. So that'll be a nice change that people can't do that anymore.
Hmm.
Jason, any other final thoughts about today's patch before we kind
Yeah.
of get into the meat of what we're talking about?
Yeah. So, and this is probably a good segue anyway. But I don't think we've really talked about kind of our cadence in terms of balance changes. So kind of the thing going on is we'll have major releases where we do major changes. So this is like your 1.2, your 1.1, or yeah, 1.15 we called it, sorry. And then we will have these minor patches afterwards to allow us to like address any outstanding issues. And also mostly like I said, we're going to be doing some tidying up of like some units that maybe got adjusted in the wrong way or just completely fell out of favor or stuff like that. So like we had the stuff. So like one of the big changes is like the CWTAA. That unit has been difficult to use, let's say, for the longest time. We're doing some adjustments to it, and we're also adjusting like the unit like the WESP, which we knew was kind of really hard to use as well. So that's another unit that's getting some changes. But for these minor patch follow-ups, we're trying to not massively shift the meta. We're going to save that for the next upcoming patch.
Okay, yeah, that's good to hear. And like you were saying, we're kind of moving to this new update cadence of sort of releasing a larger update like Emerald Bear, and then having a smaller sort of tidy up update a month later.
Yeah.
So that's kind of going to be the plan moving forward, and we'll have you'll be able to see that more clearly in our fall and winter roadmap, which we're hoping to release soon. Still waiting on a couple things, but we'll get that out to everyone as soon as we can. So Jason, I guess my other question is, in terms of like cadence and future planning, did we get everything into Emerald Bear that you wanted to, or was there anything that, because I know like Emerald Bear on paper looks like a pretty large update, but I remember talking to you privately, you're like, well, there were still some things that we didn't get in that we wanted to.
So we for 1.2 in particular, I'm like a lot of people noticed this, but the balance side of the changes was much smaller than our usual major releases. One of the reasons behind this was because we put a lot of effort into feature work. So like a lot of the things that was in 1.2 was actually like changes to pathfinding, quality of life changes to a lot of the abilities and stuff like that. So we spent a lot of effort prioritizing that. Moving forwards, we're not that was kind of an anomaly. So just in terms of setting expectations for like the next major patch, there will be more meaningful changes that are aimed to kind of shift how multiplayer is kind of played.
And we do have quite a bit more, or that we have been working on.
Yeah.
On the wings.
But we also did quite a lot of data cleanup in 1.2 as well. I'm not sure if people saw, but there's like a table that Darren populated that basically we corrected a lot of the movement of like the entire roster of vehicles, which is a small amount. This was a less noticeable change, but moving forwards, it makes it much easier for us to make adjustments because now that all the vehicle stats actually talk to each other properly, we can then make corrections more easily. So yeah.
Okay, no, that's great to hear. So let's maybe talk about a bit of a juicier topic, and that is the state of balance and multiplayer in Company of Heroes 3. So how do we feel things are kind of looking right now? Darren, let's maybe start with you. How do you kind of feel about like just the current state of multiplayer balance across the game? Maybe when it comes to faction balance or battle groups or playstyle, how are you kind of feeling right now?
In terms of faction balance, I would say both you and me, Jason, agree that like USF and Wehrmacht are in a fairly good place, and especially in terms of like their diversity, win rates, and what you can or cannot use. Where the Africa factions tend to fall bit more, in particular, to more monodimensional play style, just being reliant on very very specific units. So we're hoping that we can start pushing them to have more build options and some variety, particularly for the DAC.
Yeah. But like ever since one of the third-party sites updated, I don't want to get the name wrong, but I think it's Go3 Stats. Now that like win rates are out, like for the most part, we're pretty confident in the win rates average across all of our factions. We know there's an imbalance right now in like 4v4 in particular right now, but yeah, like we're pretty happy with the win rates that are achieving for like USF and Wehrmacht, again, and they're also achieving it with a meaningful amount of variety, amount of build and strategic diversity. So we're kind of thumbs up there. But what we're not thumbs up on is like UKF and DAC, while they are competitive, they have major flaws in terms of like, for example, in hyper competitive, DAC is kind of unfavored because they have some poor interactions with USF, and also the way a lot like UKF, for example, is good. Can often just mean spamming certain units over and over again, which is not ideal. So we're going to be shifting a lot of our focus in the future to really like flesh out these factions, make sure that all of their options are interesting and viable, and there's meaningful strategic diversity to them and to their battle groups as well.
Okay, no, that's good to hear. What about battle group balance? I know that's something that you're also looking at.
So yeah, so at a high level, we think again USF and Wehrmacht are in a much better place than the six battle groups for our African factions, Africa theater factions. Sorry. In terms of diversity, we know there are still some that are stronger than others. I know Armored comes to mind for a lot of our USF players and well everyone really. So that's definitely on our radar. But for the most part, we think there's a lot of meaning. Like the best thing is there's a lot of meaningful diversity here, which is good. However, at the same time, there are some things that are just not as good, even though the battle groups are good. So one of the things that is on our radar is like defensive play, especially like emplacements in particular. Field defenses, we kind of like dub all of the things like bunkers, sandbags, wires, mines, all that stuff, isn't in the best place right now. So that's another thing. Like I believe, you know, the last time we came up and talked about balance, we talked about a lot of the parts of the game that we were uncomfortable with or like that we wanted to move forwards improving. I think we've done meaningful changes in all of those areas up until now. So like this is kind of a new update of like what are some of those new fields are, and field defenses is definitely one of them.
Okay. Darren, what about you? What are your kind of thoughts on maybe not just battle groups, but like play styles within those battle groups and factions?
I think for at least 3 of the factions in particular, so we're talking about USF, the USF, Wehrmacht, and even to the British, they have fairly good at least among their battle groups diversity and like ways to play them. In particular, DAC tends to be much harder in terms of getting their diversity, just because they are very reliant on specific things or needing specific tools to counter particularly USF in general, which makes some of their battle groups a bit harder to use.
Okay.
And another note is it depends on what kind of mode you play as well. Like UKF, I think, is in a bit of a better place in 4v4. They're a little too strong right now, but like in terms of diversity, they're in a better place. But if you go and play UKF in 1v1, their diversity immediately suffers for a few different reasons. So like we're keeping our eye on all modes. So like we're not just balancing just for one mode in particular. We want to make sure that the game is interesting play for all factions, all battle groups, and all modes, which is a lofty goal, but we're trying our best, and we're spending a lot of time trying to hit these goals.
Yeah. Jason, I know you often talk about like some of the high level pillars in terms of like balance. So I'm kind of wondering what your thoughts are on like how those play into the current state and what you might be thinking about in terms of like how should we tackle some of these things.
I think the biggest one that we're going to be focusing on, and we're going to be talking a lot about, is strategic diversity. Like we've built a lot of different features, a lot of different mechanics and playstyles into the game, but we haven't had all of the time to really flesh all of them out. Field defenses is one. Another one is like kind of like our stealth and our camo, like our sneaky play, basically. Artillery is also not like unworkable. It's not in the best of spots either. So these are just three examples of like parts of the game that we really want to continue to improve.
Okay. What about you, Darren? Is there anything in terms of like the design philosophy or the pillars around balance that you're kind of thinking about right now?
In terms of the design philosophies, no, we've been trying to focus on all our game modes. So like we want like strategic diversity for like all the factions in various game modes. We don't want it just like, oh, this faction's only good in 1v1, but the moment they go into 3v3 or 4v4, their win rates would like plummet it down previously, like USF was for quite a bit of time before Emerald Bear.
Okay. Is there anything else that we want to cover in terms of like the current state before we start talking about like what's to come?
Yeah. Well, I mean, we're kind of talking with both interchangeably here.
Sure.
Like one thing I'll mention is another thing we're keeping our eye on is veterancy. We know like veterancy is kind of hit and miss on some units. Like some units vet way too fast, some vet too slow. Some units vet are really meaningful and cool, and some are not. So that's going to be another thing on the docket that you'll see us work towards in the future. Now, when I mean future, I mean like in like winter and fall and whatnot. Like in not like everything's next patch. So I like manage.
It's on our radar.
Yeah,
It's
it's
just
not
not
managing
something.
expectations. But yeah, these are kind of our future things. Because like if you look back to some of the stuff we talked about earlier about like team weapons were basically unplayable for the first few months after launch. I think we've gone very far from that original launch window, where an anti-tank gun was basically a trap and you never wanted to buy one. So yes.
Okay. No, that's great to know. So more specifically about some of those future goals. Like I said, we're going to be showing off the fall and winter roadmap soon. So that's coming soon. I know we keep saying that, but it's sooner than the last time I said soon. So what do we have in store when it comes to balance? Darren, I know we were kind of before this talking a little bit about like the intra-faction balance. Is there anything specifically there that you're hoping to address?
For the big one, that I believe is our big one, particularly after watching some of the tournaments, is getting the battle groups moves more in place with each other. Or so we want to correct a few issues there. We still want the battle groups to be viable and you can play with them, without needing to go specific routes. But we do want to tone down some of the more egregious things with some of the battle groups.
Yeah. I'm allowed to do a shout out to AE
Sure.
for
Yeah,
a
absolutely.
fantastic tournament.
Yeah.
I definitely watched all the games and got a lot of fun out of it, but also a lot of information out of it. So we're also making some adjustments in response to a lot of the things we saw, for example. But yeah, in terms of like diversity, like we know like if we're talking specifics, like part of Wehrmacht's tech tree is a little bit underpowered at the moment. Like no one really goes for certain units. We also know that like for USF, certain strats are just way better than others, especially if you look away from versus Wehrmacht and into DAC. You basically have like one or two ways to kind of like really push them around. So we're going to be making some adjustments to that as well. And then shifting our focus to the other factions again. We know like when they're good, but they're like very like reliant on certain things that we kind of want to spread out. Yeah.
So one of the other things that I think we were talking about before the stream, and we kind of touched on already, was like systems balance. So you mentioned veterancy. Is there anything else there that we're hoping to address in the coming months?
Well, we've already mentioned it before, but I said 1.23 didn't get all the anti-air changes that we wanted to do, but the one after, we definitely have now systems in place to allow us to tune the anti-air to be better, and it should allow them to feel much more responsive. In particular, anti-air will now be able to just fire at planes that are out of the border regions of the map, where prior anti-air would maybe get like 1 to 2 seconds to shoot at planes before they could do anything. But we also got like a lot more work that's not just balance related, but we wanted to surface more information to the player, in the terms of like our various abilities and upgrades. So, going forth, should be now values for a lot of like the abilities and the upgrades to better tell the player what this provides. Let's say I bought improvised armor for the Americans. You'll now understand like how much armor each of your vehicles is going to get for the upgrade, as well as like sprint for Panzer Grenadiers, like how much faster they're going to move and how much harder they are to hit while they are running.
Okay, no, that's fantastic to hear. I'm definitely looking forward to some of those improvements, because obviously the more information that a player has, the better. Jason, was there anything else in terms of systems balance? I know we already talked about the British forces and the DAC. Was there anything like specific that you kind of wanted to like dig in there?
So two things. So quickly, going off Darren's point, um, along with the numerical changes to tooltips, so we're going to be showing a lot more values. So like, rather than you do more damage, it's like maybe 30% more damage. We'll give you more rough aggregates where we can. But another thing that's going alongside with this is we are trying to improve the quality of some of the abilities in the game. We know some abilities are just a little way too good for how little effort you need to put into them, or some of them are just really difficult to use, or they go against like the idea of the unit. There's quite a few different issues.
We're
And
also
yeah,
we're also toning down some of the abilities that might do too many things at once. Looking at you, or Seek and Destroy in particular, and your 5 bonuses.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, that's going to be an ongoing thing. That has been an ongoing thing since launch. We've been trying to adjust abilities as we've gone, but like going forwards, that's another big area. But yeah, specifically for UKF and DAC, we're keeping an eye on half-track deployment and the training center in particular. These two systems are interesting, and there's a lot of promise to them, but they're not quite hitting the mark in terms of like like some of them are a little like railroady in terms of what you get. So like you get 5 sections and then you get the upgrade, right? We want to make it so that like it's more adaptable, that you don't always do the same thing every game, and also there's like different viable paths to go, rather than like you always get this unit if you're using half-track deployment, or always get this upgrade if you're going Brits, for example.
Okay. What about battle groups? Is there anything that we specifically like? Maybe we don't get into the nuts and bolts of the details of what we want to change or address there, but is there anything about battle groups that we want to do in the future, Darren?
In terms of the battle groups, at least for 1.3, I mean, you probably shouldn't expect like giant reworks to like all the abilities and units, but we are definitely doing large like touch ups and boosts to things that need it for that are definitely underperforming either in 1v1 or the team games. And a lot of changes, like we target a lot of changes at the DAC battle groups to make their units feel better.
Yeah. Like the North African factions, their battle groups, while there's a lot of interesting stuff in there, and they are quite powerful, they don't quite integrate as well into people's strategies as much as the Wehrmacht or the USF ones are. That's kind of the biggest issue with them. So like some of them actively are just difficult to fit into your build order. Like UKF Commandos comes to mind as a specific example. So these are things we kind of want to improve, whether that's like, we're not quite sure exactly what those adjustments will be, but this is definitely something we're keeping our eye on.
Yeah. I saw someone in the chat just ask about selection boxes. That is something that we're looking at. More news in the future, but we are looking at that. So what about play style balance? I know this is something, Jason, you kind of called out before we started. What do we want to do with playstyle balance, and what do you even mean by playstyle balance?
Yeah. So again, I think we've harped on this term a little bit too much this stream in particular. But like in terms of diversity of like strategies, right?
Yeah.
Especially in like but this matters to all modes. But like for example in 4v4, we know that our game is a little bit more aggressive than like the traditional titles, and that's to a degree fine, but we definitely want to make sure that if you want to be that turtle, that really annoying turtle in that corner of the map, that we allow you to do that kind of gameplay. So there's quite a few different initiatives going towards enabling that kind of play. So again, but like improvements to field defenses, but also just a few adjustments to like how artillery works and other things like that. And again, the other one was like being sneaky and doing all kinds of like interference with your opponent. That's also part of the game that we have multiple units that cloak, that can invis and kind of stealth around, but not all of them are well integrated, or some of them are a little underpowered, etc. Stuff like the stuff of this nature. So like we want to make it so that, hey, if you want to play the game in a different way, you can. And we also want to support that with as many different factions as we can as well. So we don't just want it to be like, if you want to do X, you can only do it with Y faction.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think for playstyles, it's not just also like the type, but also just within the faction tech trees themselves. We want it so like player A doesn't always go down like the A path for like specific factions. It's because we do have that wide variety of tech options amongst the factions, and so we do want players to at least use them all at least through a variety of games and not just always, build 5 of the same unit and hope for the best.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have quite a few specialist units that we know that people aren't quite engaging as much with for several reasons. So, like they could be hard to fit, or they could just not be that attractive immediately, or some of them are underpowered. We're keeping our eye on these units and seeing how we can integrate them. We don't want to force them, for example. Like we don't want to make it so that, oh, suddenly this thing is so strong that you have to use it, right? That's not the goal. The goal is more just so that if you want to use that, or if you and your buddies like develop a strat where you can specialize, do X, Y, you can. Right now, I don't think you can. So
Okay.
that's kind of the goal.
So what about some specific perhaps units or aspects of multiplayer that we're trying to take a look at in terms of that playstyle balance? I know in my notes here you mentioned support and reconnaissance units. What do you want to touch on there?
Yeah, so like quite a few of our recon units are in varying places. Like some of them are actually way too good, so like they're powerful combat unit, but they also do extremely well recon. While some units are really good at recon, but like you don't really value it when you buy them, or for different reasons. So this is another thing that we want to look at. Also, the recon system as a whole isn't in the best place, which we want to kind of improve if we can. Yeah, Darren, anything you want to mention on that?
In terms of units or that we have been looking up, there are a few who like there's no like particular for like class, but we have been taking a look at quite a few out of the assault units for particular in DAC. So like the gustatory and the assault grenadiers to make them more viable. Either
Versus as well.
Yep, yeah, a lot of the DAC infantry we've been looking at because, as well, while Panzer Grenadiers with all their upgrades are a very good unit, they generally also outcompete both the battle group units for the DAC as well as the various specialists who obviously are more vulnerable or leave gaps in the roles compared to like fully upgraded Panzer Grenadiers with 6 mans and grenades.
Yeah.
Well, what about emplacements? I know there's a bit of balance tuning that we want to do there as well.
Yeah, the 88 was a headache at launch, and then I think we kind of overcorrected a little bit.
We're
It's
doing like one change to it for 1.23.
yeah,
It's
that's
getting a
true.
health boost, but we want to do a bit more with emplacements rather than just making them incredibly tanky. We do want there to
Yeah,
be like both counterplay and play to them
yeah,
of how they're functioning.
yeah. There's some immediate shifts where like they're a little too underpowered right now, but moving forwards, we want to make the gameplay loop of both using emplacements but also engaging emplacements to be a bit more interesting, rather than just like you just park a mortar outside the range of like an emplacement, and that's just like the gameplay loop, right? We want to improve this if we can. And like for previous games have plenty of ideas for us to draw from as well, which is another thing that like we do a lot.
Just a quick correction, Miguel, aka Devem, just yelled at me in our work chat, and he said that the selection changes are in today's update. So
Oh,
Are
yeah.
they?
they're not
Okay,
coming soon; they're in today's.
All right.
there
Thank
we
you,
go.
thank you, Devem.
Credit to us. Right?
So what about viability of options? I know this is sort of a more nebulous topic.
Mm-hmm.
There are a lot of units and I guess
Yeah,
upgrades or battle groups. You could say like make them viable.
yeah.
Oh, but yeah.
So Darren, what are you sort of looking at in terms of like the viability of like mid game options? Especially I know Jason before you were talking about like tech timings and things like that. So
Mm-hmm.
what are we doing there, Darren? And then maybe I'll throw to you, Jason.
So for like a particularly we've been looking at say the Wehrmacht's Luftwaffe company. Yeah, I believe he has in terms of I guess units. Like we don't want to make the units like overpowering, as Jason has said, for like their tech timings, but we do want to make them like effective
Mm-hmm.
if for when they arrive. So either this could be things like cost reductions or performance improvements or gearing certain units to be better in dealing with the threats that they would face during that time they would be deployed.
At a higher level, two goals we're trying to hit. And again, please keep in mind these are difficult things. But one thing is we want to make it so that the mid game in particular has a little bit more depth to it. Right now, we're noticing that like you can hit the late game a little bit too quickly for a few different reasons. But we want to extend it so that there's a little bit more push and pull, and that's kind of the second thing, where there's a little bit more like I built X, so you need to build Y, so then I build Z to counter your Y kind of thing. So a little bit more back and forth in that mid game part in particular, because we know once you reach that late game, I think there is a little bit there's more of a balance there. But like at a high level, we definitely want to improve this overall across the game. So yeah.
Yeah, essentially forcing your opponent, like when you go certain options, to force them to react rather than them maintaining a certain path and not needing to react at all to what you've done.
Okay. So I know we don't necessarily have too much to cover. Like we said, today's update is a bit smaller, just kind of tidying up after Emerald Bear. Jason, I know you always relish the chance to be on camera, so you can kind of philosophize about balance and what we're trying to do with balance. Is there anything else that you kind of wanted to get across to players as we put out today's update, but then kind of focus on some of the bigger releases that are going to be coming up in the months ahead?
Sudden big open question. Yeah, like I think we've been pretty clear with everything we want to do. Like our community's been great. Like I do hope we've earned a little bit of confidence or a little bit of patience with our community in terms of like maintaining relative balance throughout the game. But yeah, like please be patient, but also please give us feedback. We're constantly looking through all of the different channels that John's mentioned in terms of like where can we improve, where are some of the issues. A lot of these processes are like iterative, right? Like sometimes we recognize a unit's not that good, so we improve it, but suddenly it's warping the meta or whatnot, and we've had that happen a few times. But like, please be patient with us. We're really trying to make a really good game here.
Okay. Anything from you, Darren, in terms of like philosophy or what we're trying to do moving forward?
No, I think we've stated everything. Like we've stated our high-level goals of what we wanted to do for the game, and particularly for Company of Heroes 3, which is that at having more playstyle options than the prior games, and having diversity within the factions. So, you're not always forced to go down specific paths. You can play with the various paths that are provided for the factions.
Okay, good to hear. Last spicy question, Jason. Collins and your philosophy on Collins, because again, like some players love him, some players hate him, but
We'll be here all day.
we'll be here all day talking about Collins. What are your plans? I guess.
Way to step on like a landmine like 5 minutes before the end of the movie, But like in terms of Collins, we definitely are aware that like. We played a lot of Code 2. We've seen where Collins have been and where they've gone. In terms of comments right now, is like we are aware right now that Collins are a little too pervasive throughout the game. In terms of what we're specifically doing to them, we definitely want them to be a little bit less, oppressive in terms of strategies. So there are some upcoming changes to a lot of these things to make them a little, less in your face.
Okay, that's good to hear. I feel like that's the best answer that we're going to get right now. So folks, like we said, it's going to be a bit of a shorter stream today. So that'll probably be it for today. Don't forget that our 1.2.3 balance tuning update is going to be releasing today, and we'll have more news on our fall and winter roadmap soon. If you want to stay up to date on everything Company of Heroes 3, be sure to follow us on your social platform of choice at Company of Heroes. Go to discord.gg/Company of Heroes so you can chat with us and other players, or follow us right here, twitch.tv/Relic Entertainment, or go to community.companyofheroes.com for everything else. Our next live stream is going to be in a couple weeks, so don't forget to tune in for that. But for now, Jason, Darren, I think we have the power. I think we have the power to summon the patch. And I think like Goku, we need everyone's energy. I need everyone's energy.
Spirit bomb this patch out.
Yeah, I need everyone's energy from the chat.
Patch, boys.
Summon the patch. Summon the patch. and we'll get that released right after we wrap up here. So thanks everyone for joining us, and again, a huge thank you to Jason and Darren. I know you two have been working hard along with everyone else on the team, and we're gonna have more. After today's update, we're gonna have more news about what's coming in the future, so stay tuned for that. Thanks, folks. Like I said, I see KJ through the camera lens. I'm gonna wink at him. I think you can drop the patch now, KJ.
Fire away.
So you
Release the
should,
floodgates.
yeah, you should find that on Steam in the next little bit here, folks. So thanks everyone, and we'll catch you next time. Adios.